Hello, my name is Sean O'Hara. I'm an architect and principal with EV Studio in Denver, Colorado, and a member of the AI Denver board. It's my pleasure today to have a brief discussion with Dr. Kermit Baker about the upcoming 2014 AIA Design and Practice Conference and his session at 9 a.m. on Friday, October 10th. Dr. Baker is the chief economist for the American Institute of Architects and a senior research fellow at Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies. Hello, Dr. Baker.
Thanks, John. Sean, great to join you today.
Yeah, are you looking forward to your visit to Colorado?
Very much so. Looking forward to seeing the Rocky Mountains up close.
Yeah, do you get any free time while you're here?
Unfortunately, only a very little, but I'll try to take advantage whatever I can get.
Okay, wonderful. Well, can you give us a little bit of an overview about what you'll be speaking about?
Sure, I'm going to talk about business conditions that architecture firms are facing through the remainder of 2014 and into 2015, what the construction environment looks like, what the economy looks like, what some of the issues that they may be dealing with as they go about designing their projects, and what kind of conditions they can hope to see at their firm as they move forward over the next year or two.
Sure. So has the AIA always had a chief economist, or what's the backstory there?
No, I'm the very first one, and I've been with the AIA about 20 years. The origin of the position was back in the early 90s. The economy, the construction industry, and the architecture profession went through a very, very serious downturn. A lot of firms went out of business, dramatic losses during that time, and there was a board resolution passed in the early 90s that they should have an economics function in-house to help members navigate through some of the volatility that we see in the economy and help to understand construction cycles a little bit better.
Okay. So I think we're all familiar with the Architecture Billing Index and the compensation report. I think those are the two things that as AIA members we sort of know the AIA produces. I'm curious, are there other reports or white papers that sort of the average architect would find useful for their business?
Well, the third one there, you've touched on two big ones, but the third big one is we put out a report, and it's just coming out really over the next week or two, called The Business of Architecture. And we take an in-depth look at firm characteristics, what services they're providing, how they're structured, how the profession is changing, the composition of membership, and things like that. It's really the most thorough report we put out on the profession and how it's evolving. We do it every 2 years, so it's a really important update as to how firms are coping with changes that they're seeing in the economy and in the construction industry.
Oh, great! And so, yeah, 2 years later, that should be a whole new picture, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, in general, what do you think that here at the end of 2014 and in 2015, what do you think is in store for Colorado architects and their businesses?
Well, things are getting better nationally, and I'm guessing that I'll find out that most firms in Colorado are seeing better business conditions. You know, the downturn that we went through, the Great Recession, was very devastating for the construction industry, and therefore was very devastating for architecture firms. We've seen modest improvement over the last 2 years or so. We're starting to see employment levels in the profession pick up a little bit. We're starting to see revenue pick up a little bit, but it has been very modest and very muted. And I think as we move into 2015, that will begin to accelerate a little bit, that we'll start to see more firms hiring architects. We'll see more project activity come in. We'll see growth in revenue at architecture firms. Certainly our Architecture Billings Index, as you referenced, has been extremely strong over the last few months. We're seeing the best numbers now that we've seen since before the recession, so all the way back to 2007 to see numbers that we're seeing now. So that bodes very well, I think, for upcoming trends that architecture firms are going to be seeing.
Okay, no, that's great. Now, is there any bad news that you'll be bringing us?
No, there's no bad news other than this recovery continues to be sort of frustratingly slow. It is getting better. We are seeing lending and financing of construction projects pick up a little bit, but again, it still is quite restrictive. We're seeing owners and developers still nervous about getting back into the real estate market because so many were burned so bad during the last downturn. But I don't think there's really any serious dark clouds out there. I think it's just slowly but surely building momentum in this industry.
Okay. Well, yeah, no, that's great to hear. So I know from living in Colorado for the last 14 years that sometimes Colorado and the Mountain West can be a little bit different from the rest of the country. Certainly it was in sort of the residential single-family home market. Is there any big differences that you see in our region from other parts of the country?
Well, Denver area and most of Colorado is very dependent on what's going on in energy markets, and they can be volatile. There were downturns in energy markets a couple decades ago the rest of the country didn't see. But I think it's playing on the upside now. Most energy-dependent areas have seen stronger economic conditions than the rest of the country, and by and large didn't see as serious of a downturn during this recession. So I think there's a good solid base to build off of as this recovery unfolds.
One of the things that I was looking at in the ABI, and I wanted to get your feedback on, was how much do international markets play into the ABI that we see here?
Yeah, that's a question we get a lot, and the answer is really very little. There's a fair amount of international work done by firms nationally, somewhere below 10%, generally 7-8%, depending on where we are in the cycle. Most of that is coastal firms. They have more of an international presence than inland firms. But we do ask every architecture firm that is a member of our panel, we ask them to provide information for their office only. So if we're going to a New York-based office, and they may have an office in Shanghai or London or South America, we're asking them to just report on projects in that New York office. So that typically strips away a lot of the international billings that firm might have.
Okay, no, that's great. So I know as a member of the AIA that there's been a lot of talk of repositioning in terms of the structure of the AIA. Does any of that trickle into your department?
Not really. That's something I've been watching pretty closely, but we really haven't seen it show up in terms of the business conditions at architecture firms yet.
Okay. And what as a firm owner, I'm always curious. What do you see about changes in the way that firms are being operated now than they were maybe pre-recession? What are you seeing there?
Well, two answers to that question. One, I think, is that most firms went through some very, very painful downsizing during the recession and are therefore quite nervous about bringing back staff until they're convinced that they will have project activity to support that staff moving forward. So we're seeing, for example, a much wider use of part-time staff now, of contract staff, than we did during the last upturn. It also has to do with, I think, the structure of the profession. A lot of downsizing of big firms. We have a much higher share of sole practitioners and two-person partnerships, for example, now than we did during the last upturn. Typical large firm is about 20-30% smaller than it was. I think that'll build back up as we see bigger firms more comfortable adding staff. So we'll see more consolidation in the profession. But we're also seeing now consolidation really across different disciplines. So we're seeing a lot of our architecture firms being bought up by engineering firms and construction firms to create large, full-service, multidisciplinary design and construction firms. And I'm guessing that's also a trend that's going to continue with us moving forward.
Yeah, no, that's definitely one that I want to talk with you a little bit more about. So I thought there was one final question that I had as an analyzer of stats, and one of the things we care about here in Colorado is who do you think is going to win the Super Bowl in 2015?
No question about that. It's going to be the New England Patriots.
I had a bad feeling you'd say that as a Boston guy. So, well, that wraps up our time here today. I wanted to say thank you for your time, and we're really excited to see you out in Colorado.
John, looking forward to it. Looking forward to the trip, and looking forward to seeing more of the Colorado landscape.
All right. Well, thanks. We'll see you in about a month.
Looking forward to it.
Okay.